Do you know, are there people going to be able to ask questions on this, or how does that work?
Yeah. People are going to be able to ask questions live. Let me see here. Let me find the link. What's up, everybody? I think I'm live now. I'm here with Dr. Shawn Baker for another episode of the Primal Edge Health podcast. Shawn Baker has been eating a 100% carnivorous diet for how long now, Dr. Baker?
Goodness, I guess we're getting close to 15 months now, so quite a while.
15 months. And his heart has not collapsed out of his chest. He's living, he's thriving. I've already heard the story of how you got started out. I want to get into some other aspects of this later on, but let's maybe start at the beginning. And how did you hear about just like this approach, and how did you come to know about what it is you're doing now, this carnivorous apex predator diet?
Well, I mean, I just kind of read through, the low carb and ketogenic literature, and then there's a few references to these kind of guys doing a zero carb or carnivorous stuff, and so I just read about the people that were doing it. There's a couple groups on Facebook and some other stuff that's been out there for years and years, and I just thought it sounded appealing. The interesting thing to me, because I was, as a physician, I noticed a lot of people getting rid of chronic disease being an interesting experiment. So I just, I did it myself, and lo and behold, I had a great result. I mean, I noticed, these things that I thought were just common signs of aging just kind of just disappear as I did the diet. And so I continued to do it, continued to study about it, continued to try to make sense of it, continued to try to interpret, what was supposed to happen according to everybody else, what was actually happening, and why it wasn't happening the way everyone said it was. Why wasn't I getting scurvy? Why wasn't I getting all these, medical issues that we, are commonly blaming meat for? And so after digging through quite a bit of the literature and seeing this happen time and time again with a bunch of different people, I just kind of come to the realization that much of the nutritional foundational dogma that we have is based on really weak evidence and really poor studies.
Yeah, I think that's really gently put too. I mean, weak evidence. It's like, it almost seems like a lot of the opinions that have been kind of promoted in mass consciousness have just been almost completely inverted of the kind of the reality of what seems to be going on, like at the biological level, when we are consuming a mainly carnivorous style diet. So just a little background for the audience here. I've kind of off and on gravitated towards zero carb eating for the last few years. I've been doing a keto diet for something like 4 years now. My own car just honked at me. I don't know who honked from my car, but I've been doing a keto diet for a while, and I actually ended up for a long time, about a year ago, eating no fiber at all. I just went through a period where my gut was very sensitive to it. I was working through some issues, and I felt way better when I just didn't eat any carbs. And I think it's really interesting that people like Shawn and obviously thousands of other people are out there experiencing the same thing, where it's like, you're told to fix your gut, you got to eat the plants, you got to eat the fiber. But for some people, if you've got small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you've got other issues, it seems to be like almost the opposite. So, yeah, do you have any comments on that, on the gut issues with, the perceived need for fiber for the gut issues seems to be one of the major drawbacks that people would see to a carnivorous diet. But I find that that's like, my gut benefits from not having so much fiber all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that is sort of the collective consciousness that we need fiber in our diet, and somehow got to protect our guts. And, that goes back to Dr. Burkitt in the 1960s when he was looking at African tribes, and he noticed that in general they ate a little bit more fiber than the average Western population. They were free of disease, and so his hypothesis was we needed to eat more fiber. What he failed to sort of recognize, and some other people that also looked at that data said, no, it's because they're not eating the refined processed stuff and the sugar that's making them healthier. And so, but his
is kind of like that's like the Weston A. Price kind of angle, right? Like, it's the processed refined grains and sugar, not the fiber.
Well, I mean, that's one way you can interpret, but his interpretation was fiber. Of course, the people that made fiber, the cereal industries and some of those other folks that, that have this, we can't digest fibers. Humans have no capacity to digest cellulose. And so they just basically made this as a cheap very cheap source of food that they could fortify and put a little sugar on it potentially and make a lot of profit on it. So a lot of it's been, that fiber notion has been driven by industry. It's propped up by a lot of profit. But, you know, we see clearly that people's digestive health improves when they eliminate fiber. I see it time and time again, almost daily. You know, we have such a sort of even becoming an epidemic proportion of people with gastrointestinal problems. Irritable bowel syndrome is becoming extremely, you know, popular.
Yeah, it's like the norm. It's like everybody seems to at least think they've got some sort of a gut issue, or everyone's telling everyone they got leaky gut. You know, I mean, these are a lot of the key words in the whole like ancestral health community: leaky gut, irritable bowel. These are huge issues.
Well, and fiber is, I mean, it's irritating to the guts. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's a rough material that, you know, you've got this, you know, your body can build up a defense to it. You know, we can build up secrete a thick mucus layer to kind of protect ourselves from that irritant, this fiber. But when that sometimes breaks down, continuing with the fiber tends to make things worse. And again, I see literally, you know, thousands upon thousands of people all saying the same thing. When they cut out the fiber, their guts got better. And so I think there's obviously something there. I mean, you can go back, you know, my argument is that humans evolved to be apex predators. You know, we successfully hunted, killed, and ate every animal on the planet. And what does an apex predator eat? They tend to eat meat. I mean, you know, that's what we are. That's what we became. And that's generally what our food is. And so I think that's why we're seeing so many people, I mean, not only just improve their guts, but their symptoms of autoimmune disease, arthritis, mental health, you know, skin health, you know, joint pain, all are getting better when they, you know, drop out fiber and go, you know, primarily meat based.
Yeah. So I had a guy, if you look on Instagram, he calls him, I think it's at Big Strong Fast on Instagram, but Chris Bell, he made that film about steroids called Bigger, Stronger, Faster. I talked to him about keto a while ago, and I saw his Instagram the other day, and he's doing a carnivore diet. He's been doing it for several months, and I know he's had long-standing hip issues, and even I think he had a hip replacement, or maybe 2 hip replacements. And he's been doing the carnivore diet, and he's raving about it. It seems like it's just taken everything to another level. So it seems there is a big part of the population who's done paleo, who've done keto, and then they've tried the zero carb. And I'm not saying it's for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should do it, but it definitely seems like there's something there that really helps like a lot of people. I mean, the pain thing is very interesting to me. The autoimmune conditions being improved by eating an all meat diet is just amazing, because we're told, you know, the common knowledge is that plants are medicine, that meat is naughty. And, you know, not only is it bad for our bodies, but it's destroying the planet. And when cows fart, it's so bad for the environment and all this stuff. You know, it just seems to me like we need to really rearrange our perception concerning these issues and take a hard look at the science. So you mentioned this like association between fiber and health that was assumed just because some African populations ate a lot of fiber and seemed to be healthy. I mean, to me, it seems like a huge logical leap. I mean, why should we be able to assume that just because a healthy population has some fiber in their diet, that they're healthy because of the fiber in their diet? That seems kind of crazy. Do you think that makes sense?
Well, I mean, it's a simplistic assumption, and it doesn't take a lot of things into context. You know, like I said, the context is likely they weren't eating sugar and all the processed food that we were. But, you know, that's somebody ran with that. Somebody thought, well, that sounds pretty real. Same thing with like the cholesterol hypothesis. You know, somebody said, well, you know, cholesterol is found in heart disease, so therefore cholesterol causes heart disease. And so, you know, they take these simplistic things. They kind of make sense, but when it's borne out, it doesn't really work that way. That anecdote you talked about, Chris Bell, you know, actually it's kind of funny because I actually went up and met with Chris and Mark and his family, and actually I was the one that kind of got him started on that diet.
Oh, so, nice! You evangelized them into the carnivore ways.
Yeah. So Mark, his brother's doing it well, and his cousin Steve has actually done well. He's lost something like 40 pounds since I saw those guys back in January. Yeah, but Chris has had two hip replacements, has a lot of arthritis, and he says that he's just feeling so much better, getting leaner, getting stronger. Same thing with his brother Mark. His mother Mark is, you know, and he's a big, strong trainer, you know, big, strong powerlifter. He says, yeah, I feel leaner, stronger than I have in years. So it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing, man. And like, I can't say enough how appreciative I am of this being brought to the consciousness of the masses is that, the vegan dogma, and I'm not saying like vegans, but I'm saying like the dogma of the vegetarian vegan myth of this is a healthy way to eat. This is the way that people need to be eating. When you actually look at the history of this, a lot of this talk comes out of like the Royal Society, British Royal Society, eugenic societies, and basically British aristocrats who were writing about how are we going to consolidate the food supply and control all of our territories and all of our serfs. So I mean, I think it's really funny you mentioned plant cellulose being indigestible. There's Cosmopolitan magazine from 1929, February 1929, Cosmopolitan magazine. There's an article in here by this dude. His name is Lord Birkenhead. There's Lord Birkenhead's big Birkenhead. So Lord Birkenhead, this is like one of the only things he ever published. He was very low-key guy when you look at his history. He wrote an article, and Cosmo said, save this article 100 years from now. This is what the world's going to be. And when you read the article, it's not like this guy had a magic looking glass and he was saying, wow, this is the future. I'm gleaming the future with my beautiful alchemy. It's like, no, this guy, he's writing the plans on how we're going to consolidate power over the next century. And it's very interesting. One of the points he makes is that agriculture will be abolished except as a hobby, and all foodstuffs will be produced synthetically. And then at the end of the article, he goes on to muse about cellulose and how it's indigestible. By 2029, agriculture, if not abolished, will be in decay, at least in civilized lands. The step towards the end of agriculture will be the production of benevolent bacteria able to fix the atmospheric nitrogen. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Then he talks about we're going to get bacteria that'll degrade cellulose and allow us to mass produce cellulose because sugar and starch are the most what does he say? The most important nutrients. So, I mean, this is just social engineering from the 1920s, the British Royal Society talking about how we need to consolidate the food supply in order to control the masses using a vegan diet. So, I mean, this is not something that's new. This vegan dogma has been around for a while, and it's not just an organic thing that came about naturally because this is our natural diet. When you look at the history of the world, what vegan population is there? Like, is there a single vegan or vegetarian population out there, Dr. Baker?
Well, I mean, if you discount, India obviously has a large vegetarian population, but but as far as the vegan population, there's never been a society that's lived, survived a generation that's pure vegan. So that just doesn't exist. It's not a human diet for sure.
That's so funny. So India, and it's funny when you look at India and the caste system, and it's very, very interesting that like India of all places is one of the most prominent plant-based diets, and it's a total slave caste system where people are walking around in the streets with cows that are edible, and instead they're like worshiping these cows instead of eating them. So that's pretty crazy.
Well, it's interesting to note that India has the highest number of diabetics in the world, and they have tremendous heart disease, and their life expectancy is particularly low. And so it's the plant-based diet has not particularly improved that situation for those guys. So it's just kind of an interesting population study to look at. Obviously, there's other factors that go into that, but for the people that think that plant-based is going to somehow be the main factor that's going to make you live long, I just say look at India, and they don't. And they've got some challenges with regard to poverty and stuff like that. But you can compare that to other impoverished nations that eat more meat, and they tend to do better.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Somebody's mentioning here in the comments now, Sean, if you I sent you a link to the where the live video is, where it's being broadcast. You can actually look at the comments if you pull that up. But someone says the Maasai considered any plant-based foods to be for cattle and not for humans. It's a really interesting observation that Michelle White made. Someone else mentioned Vince Miranda. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you look at the etymology of some of the words, back, particularly in the old Scandinavian languages, the definition of meat was actually food, and the definition of grain was actually deer food. And so, even back then, they knew that what was for the cattle and what was for the humans. And so, kind of another interesting observation. But yeah.
Fascinating. All right. So Vince Gironda had his clients on eggs and steak diet. He himself never won a bodybuilding competition because he was too ripped for the standards, says Joanna Hapunked. So yeah, Vince Gironda, steak and eggs diet. He was an advocate of that quite a while ago. Another guy, have you heard of, they called him, if you looked at the forums like 2 years ago for zero carb, there was a lot of talk about this guy, Owsley Bear. And he was like, Bear Owsley Stanley was like a 60s counterculture figure. And he was also an advocate for very low carb diet. And he had like a throat cancer that he said he kept it in remission because of his all muscle meat diet.
Yeah, I mean, he was like the sound guy for the Grateful Dead, and
Yeah.
he did that for about 53 years until he died in a car crash in Australia a few years back. But yeah, I mean, he obviously had a lot of other things going on as well, but he was a big proponent of the diet for many years, for sure.
All right, so let's see here. I had a couple questions, but I'm reading the comments. There's so many good comments. All right, so your diet in particular. A lot of people are like, well, what is the carnivore diet? What is the carnivore diet? I don't know if you've defined like a the diet, but what does your diet look like? And what is it that you've been doing lately? What's your daily food intake look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different for everybody, but I mean, the general sort of consensus is, we're kind of eating just food that comes from animals, and we're skipping out on plants, except for maybe using them as a seasoning, perhaps. But for me, I just eat, a couple steaks in the morning, a couple steaks in the evening, typically about 4 pounds of meat a day. I'm a big active guy. That's what I've been doing. When I started, I had a little more variety. I would include more eggs and a little bit more dairy, a little more seafood, different cuts of meat. But as it goes on, the farther you go, you kind of find that you really find that your craving is just for, give me some beef, give me a nice steak, and that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'll do, probably for the foreseeable future, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. So straight up steak. What about salt?
I put salt on mine. It's kind of interesting. This is kind of an interesting thing because a lot of people will do this without salt. I know particularly that Owsley Stanley was an opponent of using salt. I think salt usage sort of, is kind of based on, sometimes I think the higher your exercise capacity, exercise output, the more salt you're going to probably need, most likely. And I think there's
right, sweating it out.
There's a bodybuilder that's doing this now by the name of Mark Lobliner, who he and I have shared an observation. I think, and other people, they notice that one of the concerns with going with no carbs is you won't get a quote unquote pump in the gym. And what we're noticing is if you have adequate electrolytes, before you work out, you tend to get that. And so I think what's happening is, with the electrolytes, you increase both your intravascular and extravascular water, and that's where you get the pump. It's not the sugar. The sugar probably has an indirect effect on that through the action of insulin on the renal handling of electrolytes and salt. So that may be where the pump is coming from. And so for the guys that worry about flat muscles, I would say make sure you load up on a little bit of electrolytes before you train, and you should probably notice a pretty good response with that.
Cool. So electrolytes. Have you seen this be an issue with people who, follow like a strictly, carnivorous diet? Because I know, people will say, well, you're not going to get very much magnesium, sodium, potassium from just muscle meat. What should, or not what should, but what do you do, or what have you seen others maybe do in this situation concerning electrolytes on a pure carnivore diet?
I think that might be an issue initially when you first transition, but I think once you become stable on the diet, that's not an issue at all. I mean, if you think about it, all of your muscles have magnesium, potassium, sodium, calcium, whatever micronutrient that's in it. And so as long as you eat that in sufficient quantity, and the question is, what is the sufficient quantity? Well, the answer to that is, what is your appetite? Basically, your appetite will key you in on how much to eat. You'll end up, replete with all those, vital micronutrients and vitamins that you need. I'm going to share all my labs on Rob Wolf's show next week, I guess, and we'll talk about that. But I basically don't have any deficiencies that I would be concerned with, and all I eat is basically muscle meat.
So, all right, so you got lab work done, 15 months, zero carb, straight up steaks, maybe some eggs in there too, or is that just steak?
Yeah, I mean, I would have a few eggs, not that often though. Typically, if I'm on vacation traveling somewhere where it's not so easy to get a steak, sometimes I'll find, add some eggs to that. But generally, for me, probably I eat eggs maybe once a month at this point. It's pretty unusual right now. It's pretty much close to almost all red meat. I'd say about 98 to 99% of my diet is just straight up red meat.
And you already had the lab work done, and you're sharing that next week, or the lab work you're getting?
Yeah, I've got most of it done. Rob, they got some special labs. They're adding some new stuff some new novel sort of biomarkers they're looking at. So they want me to get that. So I'm going to get that as well in the coming days. But I'll have a whole big panel to discuss next week with those guys.
Yeah, cholesterol. What about the cholesterol issue? Do you mind sharing what your cholesterol levels were in these labs, or do you not have it yet?
Well, I'll like I said, I'll save that for Rob's show. But what I will say is that what I've noticed in general with people on this diet, if we look at blood lipids, the majority of people, what they'll see is an improvement in their triglycerides and their HDL. That usually HDL goes up, triglycerides go down in most cases. We know that the fractionation of LDL, it usually tends towards the more favorable larger particles rather than the smaller dense particles, which some people feel is less atherogenic. LDL and total cholesterol can be variable. Some people it goes up, some people it goes down, some people it stays the same. So I think what we know about cholesterol, it's kind of interesting because when we talk about people going on diets, and it doesn't really matter the diet. If you go on a diet and you lose weight, you get leaner, your mental health gets better, your joints get better, your digestion gets better, your skin gets better, your libido improves, every single thing that would say you're a healthy human gets better. And then you just have one lab value that says, oh, wait a minute, we don't like this. To me, it makes sense to say, well, maybe that lab value doesn't really show what we think it shows. I think there's pretty good evidence to show that particularly total cholesterol and perhaps LDL cholesterol are not a very good biomarker, particularly without taking in a lot of context there. The converse would be like to say, well, your cholesterol is high, so you need to get off that diet, and you need to make your joints need to hurt again. You need to have bad digestion. Your mood needs to go down. Your libido needs to go down, just so you can have a normal cholesterol. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. And
what's the most profitable drug that pharmaceutical companies are making right now? Is these statins are incredibly profitable, and not only profitable on the front end, but you get a profit on the back end too, because there's a lot of side effects. And what are some of the side effects of, how about this? What are some of the side effects of low cholesterol? Are you well versed in the low cholesterol side effects?
Well, yeah, I can tell you what they're associated with. There's
there are associations, of course, because this is what we're looking at. We're not looking at causation. We can assume causation and play, fake science, but I think this is really crucial about what Sean's saying is it's not causing it. We're looking at correlations.
Yeah,
so
all these are proxy biomarker associational studies. So you really can't say anything other than looking at these population studies when you have a lot of confounders in there. But if you look at the associations, and people love to look at the associations when it goes the other way, but low cholesterol is associated with a higher risk for Parkinson's disease, dementia, depression, suicidality. It's associated with higher risk for a number of types of cancer. Cholesterol is a vital component of our structure and our function. We need it. They're precursors for hormones. They are definitely required for structure, particularly cell membranes and our nervous system in particular. Our brain is made largely of cholesterol, and so to sit there and consciously try to get rid of our cholesterol as much as possible, it has a negative effect. And it's shown all-cause mortality. The likelihood of you dying goes up the lower your cholesterol is. So those things are just, again, you can't ignore that stuff.
No. And it's like, if we're going to make association, causation assumptions about, cholesterol is present when people get so-called heart disease or heart attacks, then it's not okay to look at the associations between low cholesterol and what I'm getting at is the plant-based advocates tend to pick and choose what becomes relevant, and it gets a little bit hypocritical there, because if you're going to say, cholesterol causes heart disease because when people have heart disease, there's low cholesterol. Well, what about all-cause mortality rate increasing with low cholesterol? What about dementia increasing with low cholesterol? What about testosterone tanking with low cholesterol? Do we not get to talk about these things? It seems kind of silly.
Yeah, I agree. It's obviously they have an agenda. They certainly cherry pick the studies they want to support and make the narrative they want, and they can make an argument that's compelling and make these sort of emotional, heartstring tugging documentaries and stuff like that. But the proof's in the pudding. What happens? Most of them drop out of veganism because they're health suffers. And so that's what happens after a few years. You know, it's usually attracts a really young group of people that have big physiologic reserve and a lot of genetic potential. And as they slowly watch that erode, or they make very little progress, you know, within most of them within a few months they drop out. But some of them that kind of hang on for a few years, you know, they do that. They notice their health drops off, and then they quit. Or then some of them that just never quit despite horrible health. And so to me, that just, you know, it just doesn't.
The true believer. True believers.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's hurting your health. It doesn't matter if you're deficient in certain nutrients or sterile. What matters is you adhere to the dogma. And I think that can be really dangerous. You know, it's like you can't, if you're not willing to take an honest look at the situation and the evidence, and you know, even just tuning into your own body and what it's telling you, there's a real issue there with some people. So you know, a lot of people are asking about eggs. A lot of people are like, they maybe feel like you're saying that you don't like eggs, or, you know, for whatever reason you're not eating eggs. So what do you think about eggs in general as part of the carnivorous approach?
No, eggs can be totally fine. And like I said, I do eat them occasionally. You know, what happens is, I think the way I would incorporate that into the diet is I would have steak and eggs. You know, I would mix them together. I wouldn't just kind of subsist on eggs. I think that's you're gonna end up. It's just from a practical adherence to the diet. If you are eating a lot of steak, you're going to find it more satisfying. Steak, I think, is more nutritious than eggs. Some people will actually develop an intolerance to eggs, and I know personally, if I eat just a great much eggs by themselves, I'll have some digestive problems with that. And so I can do a steak with a couple eggs, and I'm fine. If I eat 10 eggs in one sitting, I won't be. And I used to could do that, no problem, because when I was on a ketogenic diet, I would eat a dozen, 18 eggs a day, no problem. And so now I just think that it's there's still excellent food for most people. It's just that you should probably keep them as a sort of a side dish.
Okay, so eggs probably better than kale in your.
Sure.
I'm guessing probably better than kale, but maybe not as awesome as the muscle meats. So some other people asking about the organ meats. I'm sure you get this question a lot. Like a paleo world. I mean, even our cookbook, we've got a whole section on offal, whatever you want to call it. What a terrible word, right? Who came up with the term offal? But organ meats, stuff like heart and liver, those are the two ones that I eat. I don't like kidney. I think kidney is disgusting. But what do you feel about organ meats?
Yeah, I mean, obviously organ meats are concentrated sources of nutrition, and I think that there's nothing wrong with eating them if you like them. I do not think that it's necessary for most people to do this. Here's a sort of a very simple heuristic that I like to point out. And I say this over and again, and people, they sort of, it's overly simplistic, but I think it proves a point. You and I've operated, cut a lot of people open. We are basically made out of red meat, and ultimately we're made out of animal tissue, and ultimately we're made out of animal cells, right? Every single one of our cells is an animal cell. And when we look at what is required to make an animal cell function, what's required to be in there, there's going to be magnesium, there's going to be manganese, there's going to be vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, the whole gamut, protein, fat. Everything that's required to make one animal cell is going to be contained within that animal cell. As long as you eat enough of those animal cells, and what tells you what's enough? I would argue your appetite. If you're only eating muscle meat and you're still hungry, then you didn't eat enough muscle meat to get the required nutrition. And so if you continue to eat enough animal cells, whether they be from a liver or from a ribeye steak, you're going to get the requisite amount of nutrition and be fine. And that's what I've discovered. That's what thousands of other people that don't eat organ meat have discovered. And it just makes sense. It's the simplest Occam's razor principle of nutrition that I can come up with. I lost the volume.
Sorry, I muted myself, and I forgot I muted myself. Just curious, like personally, I'm curious on how much salt you take in, like on average. I mean, I know you've broken records on the rowing machine or on a specific machine, and you work out hard. You're big, you're jacked, you're healthy. Your electrolyte intake now, I'm sure, is really different than somebody else who maybe would just be starting a carnivore diet coming from carbs. But just a general idea, like what's up with your salt and your focus on that?
I don't quantify it, man. I just throw it on my steaks, and I might take a
But
teaspoon.
like how much? How much you think?
Yeah, I mean, probably like if I were to eat like 2 pounds of steak, I might have 2 teaspoons.
Okay.
So I'd have to calculate, convert the grams on that. Usually I use like a pink Himalayan, or I got some nice Icelandic black lava salt when I went to
Ah,
Iceland.
nice. I love all these little funky salts that are all right. There's some good
Yeah,
salt from Bolivia too. Some Bolivian
yeah,
rock salt,
yeah,
Peruvian rock salt.
yeah. But then, like, sometimes before I work out, I might throw a teaspoon of salt in a glass of water and drink that. Just about 45 minutes before I work out, half an hour before I work out, and that's pretty much my salt intake for the day. One of the things I'll point out is because some people will often complain of cramps. Muscle cramping is not an unusual, phenomenon on this diet. And what I've seen for me personally, I know if I train really hard and then I don't eat soon enough, that's when I will notice that I'll get a cramp. And so I think it's just a matter of getting enough, enough nutrition in to match um, your output. And I don't know if the salt makes a difference in that case. I know for me, if I've gone like a little longer between what I'm supposed to eat and I haven't been able to eat, then I might catch a cramp. It doesn't happen very frequent, but a lot of people in the first few months will notice, pretty significant leg cramping, or for me, I'll get a cramp in my abdominal muscle, and that's always fun to have. But you
Mm.
know,
All right. So the timing of meals can be important for the cramping and the electrolyte issue. Do you think that's because like you're eating salt on the meal, or just because of the actual nutrients in the meal?
I think it's probably the latter. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons that I am not a proponent of. I like the term intermittent feasting rather than intermittent fasting. I know because a lot of people like to ask me about, do I fast? And my response typically is I feast. And what I'm saying is it's not I don't that I disagree with going long times between meals, because I think that's a natural way we eat. It's just that if I'm really hungry, I'm not going to sit there with a clock and say I got to wait 4 more hours. Because again, I'm eating such a one food diet that if I'm hungry, my body's just saying, "Hey, knucklehead, you know, give you some energy, give you some nutrition." So I don't do these, intentional fast or set a stopwatch there. I may go 24 hours without eating. That happens fairly frequently. If I go down and throw down 4 or 5 pounds of meat in one sitting, I just don't feel like eating till the next day. But to me, that's not intermittent fasting. That's just eating when I'm hungry, and I'm not hungry that often. So that's a little bit of semantics, but that's kind of how I approach it.
I get what you're saying, man. No, I've kind of reached similar conclusions. Like intermittent fasting, kind of. Sorry to the audience. Some people said that your audio was much lower than mine. I'm sorry, guys. I just lowered my audio significantly, and Sean's is maxed out. So let's hope it's good now. Um, Something that I've noticed too, and like I've kind of gravitated towards is, I mean, you mentioned you eat in the morning and you eat in the afternoon. I find that just as far as like a lifestyle schedule, ease of execution, to me that works so much better. And you get a decent period of fasting. But the modern interpretation of intermittent fasting is like you have to hit 16 hours. And then once you hit 16 hours, the magic switch gets flipped and you get these amazing benefits, but only and only if you hit it at 16 hours. And I think that that's a kind of a fallacy. When you look at most of the studies on like fasting, for the people talk about, 2,000% increase in human growth hormone. Well, that's after a 48-hour fast. And that's not going to be an anabolic effect. That's going to be an anti-catabolic effect to just, maintain muscle tissue. So I think people push the intermittent fasting pretty hard sometimes. And I'm not actually not a big fan of, telling people to intermittent fast. That I don't think it's as effective as many people are out there saying. And I think the intuitive timing of meals, especially if you're getting the proper nutrients in, and like, in your case, in the carnivore diet, a lot of people end up gravitating towards breakfast and dinner. And that's what I've done myself. So.
Well, I mean, it's certainly historically it makes more sense. We weren't always a 3 meal a day in society, and now we're a 4 or 5 meal a day and 2 or 3 snack society now, particularly Western society. You look back historically, people often ate 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, and then if you think about the practicality, assuming 20,000 years ago we were living in an ice age and you had to cook all your meals, and you're a nomads. I mean, it's not like you can break camp every 3 hours and start a fire and, do all the stuff that requires, cooking, because you spend your whole day doing that stuff. And so it's probably pretty realistic that people probably spent, they had one meal a day, maybe two meals a day back then. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know for sure, but it certainly from if I had to think about if I lived in the woods chasing animals, how often I'd want to cook meals. I mean,
or how often would you want to pick some deadly plants that are going to make you shit for 5 days and put those down the gullet? It's like if you're living a subsistence-based lifestyle. I mean, I this is all totally hypothetical, right? But I mean, I could see it being very likely that there would definitely be in many different societies, hunter-gatherer societies, people who opted to not ever eat vegetables. I mean, just because you see some of these so-called hunter-gatherer societies now, and a lot of them will include tubers and plant foods, that doesn't mean that every single member of the society is doing it. I bet that there's people who gravitated towards this for eons and just intuitively eaten this way, like somebody mentioned, the Inuit.
Well, and here's the other thing. I mean, a lot of times we like to use modern-day hunter-gatherer tribes to approximate what we did 20,000 years ago. Well, we have to realize the world has changed significantly just from a climate standpoint. But those people that are living today, the Hadza and all these other tribes that people like to say, they're living on the fringes of society, pushed out into the very edges where the pickings are pretty slim. And so they do whatever they can. If you watch the documentaries, they're excited when they get a kill and they get some meat. When they got to eat the plants, they're kind of like, it kind of sucks, So, and if we think about what our world was 25,000 years ago during the Ice Age, when much of the land was covered with grasslands, and we inhabited all those areas. It's not like we stayed still in one spot. We made it across Europe and Asia and North America and South America. So we traveled all across the land, and during these Ice Age times, much of it was grassland, and much of what there's not a lot to eat in the grasslands other than big animals that eat grass. And so
megafauna, and we're talking massive animals. We're talking like 6 foot tall sloths and giant bears and dogs that are 10 times the size you see now. Megafauna, there's a massive die-off. But yeah, man, when you think about what people were eating 20,000 years ago, eating robust, fatty animals that are just grazing. Like
I saw an interesting paper about talking about Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens, and one of the things they suggest is we probably lived a lot on even elephant and mastodon mostly, and those animals were incredibly fatty, and I think that's why a lot of people that gravitate towards carnivory will select out the fattier cuts of meat, just because I think it replicates what we kind of craved and utilized as a species early on.
Interesting enough, like the Andean heritage. So I live in Ecuador in the Andes, right? So people think about South America and I don't know, for some reason they think like this is like tropical and everybody's eating fruit. As a matter of fact, it's not very tropical in most of South America. The Andes, there are high regions in the Andes where nothing grows at all. Like there's areas where there's just a couple tubers that grow up there. And people will use some of these as like a medicinal compound. But for the most part, the Andean diet pre-conquest was based around animal products, and even pre-Inca conquest. So the Inca went around and they consolidated this massive, powerful, highly efficient system that was very similar to the European monarchs, the way that they did it too. But the main food in the Andes for thousands of years was alpaca, and they had herds of these llamas. They had herds of vicuñas, and actually during the Inca reign, it was illegal to kill males. No, it was illegal to kill females. They couldn't kill female members of the flocks. They could kill a certain amount of males, and they would do these massive hunts where hundreds of thousands of these Inca warriors would surround an entire valley with hundreds of thousands of animals, and they'd grasp hands. And this is written about in the Chronicles of Pieza de León. And he writes about how they would grab hands and they would all close in on this big valley full of animals, and they would just slaughter them. And then they would store that meat. And of course, the Inca, there's only one Inca, and the Inca's the king. Everyone else is just little, subhumans. But the Inca would dictate that you're not allowed to eat this meat. We're going to store a certain amount of it, and there was a quota. But when you look at even like after the fall of the Inca, a lot of the high Andean civilization, their diets are based around fish and llama meat, and they eat a little bit of plants here and there when they're starving, essentially, and that's what they eat. So Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a good, effective nutritional strategy. I mean, we didn't always have access to whole foods and vitamin stores and people that could ship every micronutrient from around the world. Like, these people that try to make these plant-based diets up. I mean, their diet has to come from, you can't go outside and pick a vegan diet and survive. You've got to have, multiple sources from around the world and utilize all of that transportation and fuel and fossil fuel to transport that stuff. And so it's not really that environmentally friendly, despite
Absolutely,
what
and
they
it's not
try to
very
say.
human friendly either. Like when you look at the ultimate results of the imagined vegan utopia, it's kind of like that film THX 1138. You ever see that movie?
No, I hadn't seen that one.
It's like George Lucas's first movie before he made Star Wars. He made this movie called THX 1138. It's got like Robert Duvall, and everybody's got shaved heads. They're all wearing like these white suits, and they live underground, and nobody's allowed to breed, and their food gets dispensed to them from a little like thing, and I think Robert Duvall gets like horny for this chick, and then it's like it's really off limits, and then there's this chase scene. That's the whole movie, but their whole diet is dispensed to them through this little like artificial intelligence thing. It's just, and it dispenses them their pills, and that's like basically how they nourish themselves. Because the reason I'm making fun of it, I'm making this comparison to this crazy dystopian sci-fi thing. It's like, if you're going to eat a vegan diet, you're requiring massive destruction environmentally. And also it's like most vegans, I live in Ecuador. There's probably about 20 Ecuadorian citizens who are vegans. It's just like people, they don't understand. Like these foreigners come here from like America and Europe, and they start talking about their vegan enlightenment, and the locals here, they just laugh. They're like, what are these people talking about? Like, this is crazy. Like they use donkey fat medicinally. They're using like eating snakes and bear fat. Like their diet is still relatively connected to the ways they used to eat, and they just think it's absurd. Like, how can you eat only vegetables? That's not sustainable. But I mean, most vegans that probably live in cities, probably don't have a garden, probably don't source much of their own food. Of course, I'm making generalizations here, but it's just it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, what would a vegan society even look like? I don't know. There's no real happy answer to that one, but let's see here. What about kidney stones? Aren't you gonna get kidney stones if you don't eat a bunch of plants?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because the primary driver of kidney stones are oxalate stones, and oxalates tend to be found in many plants, most actually exclusively in plants, and things like spinach and a number of other plants have oxalates in them, and so that's where the largest percentage of kidney stones are derived from.
That's actually a really interesting thing, because a lot of people who might be concerned about kidney stones from a meat-based diet might be advocating a lot of plants or even like juicing. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of oxalates rather in these green juices. And you want to maybe talk a little bit about the defenses that plants have against us eating them? I mean, it seems like animals, they'll fight for their lives. Animals will battle for their life, but plants seem to have some really intense defenses too. And this might be tied into why cutting a lot of these plants out helps people, physically and mentally a lot. I mean, what are some of these other compounds in plants that might not be as great as, as proponents might say?
Yeah, I mean, we have this concept of phytonutrients. Well, they're all basically just phytochemicals. We need to stop sort of attributing beneficence to chemicals. They act in a good way and a bad way depending on the system you're looking at. But plants evolved lots of chemicals, natural pesticides, because they were dealing, evolutionary before humans and other mammals got on the planet with insects and fungal infections, and so they had to develop a very plants evolved, to fight off insects and fungal infections in early evolution, long before mammals started eating them. So they developed these robust systems to combat that. So they have all kinds of chemicals that will incapacitate different insects that will, basically often kill them or make them unable to reproduce. They have, just thousands upon thousands of chemicals, oxalates, salicylates, phytates, cyanides, polyphenols, tannins. All these things can have a negative effect on the body. Now, we attribute some of those, and we call them phytonutrients, but really most of those, interestingly, most of the phytonutrient studies are done using isolated compounds and isolated reactions. And so we don't have a good, impression on how they impact the overall body, as a whole. And so we have all these big leaps and why these things are good based on really kind of weak, sort of limited biochemical data. But certainly, like I said, when people eliminate plants from their diet, I mean, particularly these weird sort of autoimmune diseases that we quote unquote don't know why they happen, don't know what the cure is, can only give people massive doses of steroids and immunosuppressant drugs. When those things start going away, when you exclude plants from your diet, you have to wonder, because if you look at how these things were tested for toxicity, and a lot of those studies were done, a few decades ago, they really only looked at acute toxicity. Does it make you, completely ill? Like if you eat most plants, if you go out in Ecuador and just randomly start eating plants, you're going to get pretty sick pretty quickly. So we know there's certain, foods that we eat that are made out of plants that don't make us acutely ill. The other thing we do is we check for cancer-causing properties. And so they've tested a number of these natural compounds in plants. They did this, Bruce Ames did this back in 1990, and he found that of the 52, he noted of the 52 compounds that they actually tested in animals, 27 of them gave those animals cancer, which is, stuff we consume every day. Now people don't get worried about because it's higher dose stuff. But the question is, what about chronic exposure to this stuff, and how does it affect things like our immune system and autoimmune function and joint pain and depression? All those things have never been looked at, never been tested, never been questioned, because we've always known that, yes, plants and fruits and vegetables have to be good for us. There's nothing bad they could do for us. So we kind of just dismiss that. And now what we're seeing is, wow, people with autoimmune diseases, when they give up plants, they get better. And so I think this is just, questioning all the dogma that we've been taught about nutrition. And a lot of people, it makes their heads explode when you tell them, hey, those fruits and vegetables may not be good for you. And so maybe give them a break and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you probably experience a significant amount of resistance from a certain portion of the population, but it seems like there's a massive influx of people trying this, giving it a shot, and just getting incredible results and feeling better than they've ever felt. So it's kind of undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, ultimately the results are what matter. And, it's kind of interesting because, there's people it's kind of funny because people are willing to accept that animal fat and saturated fat is not bad for us because they believe that the epidemiology that was based on was weak epidemiology. But when I point out the same thing, that, the reason we think fruits and vegetables were good is based on the same weak epidemiology. They're like, whoa, we can't believe that. That's a bridge too far. I'm just saying, if you're gonna apply that logic to one step, you need to be fully willing to accept all that logic and then truly test this stuff. And we've got people, like myself and others that are testing it, and we're finding, health gets better. And so I think we have to go back and totally revisit all of our assumptions about nutrition, what normal lab values are. We know those things change based on what your diet is, what the recommended daily allowances are. Those things were based on carbohydrate eating population. So all these presupposed things we think we know about nutrition, I think don't hold up anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we've got to really overhaul the way that we're analyzing so-called science, because there has been a massive, like, the internet has really driven this schism home really hard. But I mean, people will quote science as if there's a unified entity behind it, as if science is not what science really is, which is a process of exploration, of questioning hypotheses and testing hypotheses. People will assume that science, they'll throw out science like they're saying it's like a religious term, right? It's like, well, science says that this, and I think it's kind of ridiculous at this point how far it's gone with a lot of the plant-based stuff. Now, here's another one that really comes out, and this one is very, very popular. Protein causes cancer with mTOR, right? So we're looking at the interaction between mTOR and AMPK. what are your thoughts on like the mTOR supposed link between mTOR and cancer, longevity, stuff like that?
Yeah, again, this is another small biochemical fact that we've learned, and now we're going to extrapolate it to all of human existence in every single context you have. You cannot do that. I mean, granted, in an isolated situation in a cell culture, in a nematode or a lower animal, you might be able to show that. But how much mTOR is good? How much is bad? How frequently do you pulse it? What other things go into that? There are thousands of things that impact mTOR. So you can't just go, all protein is bad. We need to limit it as much as possible, because we know what happens to humans that limit protein. I mean, you can look at any nursing home in Western society. You see these frail people that are debilitated, and they're not robust and they're not functional. So if you limit people's protein, bad things happen to them. I mean, you think about it, human beings have survived and thrived and were evolved because we ate a high protein, a relatively amount of a high fat, decent amount of protein diet, via meat for millions of years. And now to suddenly say that all of a sudden what we evolved to eat is now going to kill us, to me, is just empirically makes no sense. And practically, it doesn't occur. We're seeing that protein, if anything, is underdosed for most people, particularly as they age, as they lose the capacity to absorb the nutrient, as their digestive health, their digestive efficiency goes down, as their teeth fall out because they've been eating garbage all these years and they can't chew a steak anymore. They get frail, they get weak, and then eventually they auto cannibalize or something because they don't get protein in their diet. They're going to take it from their body. And this is what you see. We see all these people as they get older, their body is craving protein, so they become sarcopenic. They take it from their muscle, they take it from their bone, they get osteoporotic, they take it from other internal organs, and they just sort of auto cannibalize themselves so they can get the sufficient and necessary protein and fat that's missing from their diet.
All right. So, I mean, there's a lot of people, someone dropped allergy meds, headache meds, gym weights up at 65, over 40s and 50s, more energy, no constipation, on-off roid issues disappeared. So I'm guessing he's talking about like, drugs, steroids, not as in like anabolic steroids, but, prednisone and stuff that a lot of people get on for autoimmune conditions. And there's a lot of comments in here of just people talking about the way that this way of eating has helped them immensely. Let's see here. Somebody's asking.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I get these comments dozens of times a day, and then you're supposed to tell those people eating meat is bad for you. You need to switch to plant-based, go back to your horrible health. And
the only measure of health and longevity is cholesterol. Cholesterol levels that's the metric that's used in mass medicine, right? And it's almost like mass medicine has become like it's like as dumbed down as mass media now. I mean, to me, it's so ridiculous the way that this, the structure of death management, or I'm sorry, healthcare that we're using these days. It just seems so backwards to isolate single metrics and extrapolate them into all extremes of all populations as if these are absolutes. Whereas, science was supposed to be about exploration of the testing of hypotheses, not just the assumption that every hypothesis is the new universality and the new dogma to be projected on everything. I think there's a lot of the studies that the plant-based stuff is based on are meta-analyses. You want to talk a little bit about this stuff, like the China study? I'm sure you got a million people telling you, well, what about the China study? Or what about these blue zone populations? People will say, well, they eat a lot of plants, and that's why they're healthy, because they eat a lot of plants. What do you think about some of these assumptions?
Yeah, I mean, again, there are a lot of things that determine longevity. Diet is just one factor of about probably 50 different factors there. Certainly, if you take these genetically homogeneous populations that may live long regardless of their diet. The one they love to point out is the Okinawans. Well, I'll point out the fact that the only Okinawans that lived past 100 were ones that included meat in their diet. So it wasn't the vegetables that kept them living long. The ones that actually included meat in their diet lived the longest. And so, but if you look at these,
they eat a lot of pork in Okinawa. They eat pork.
Yeah, they eat a lot of pork. I mean, they eat a lot of fish. But the thing is, you've got to look at population socioeconomic status is probably the biggest driver of longevity. If you live in dirt poor rural Somalia, your life expectancy is not going to be very long, no matter what you eat. I don't care if you're eating beans and rice all day long; you're not going to live very long. But if you live up in the northern colds of Alaska, in the freezing population, you're not going to live as long just because you're poor and you don't have access to the health care. If you live in Switzerland, you're going to live a long time. I don't care if you're a vegan, vegetarian, or a meat eater. Those are, those socioeconomic factors, having a wealthy society, having access to healthcare, having access to good sanitation, because a lot of what drives early death and population health down is infectious disease. So if you're living in the slums where you're going to get diphtheria or influenza or hepatitis, you're going to die earlier. And so all these things that don't take those things into account are misleading people. And to say it's attributable to only diet is widely misleading. I can certainly point out nations. I just got back from Iceland. Those guys eat a lot of meat. They've always eaten a lot of meat. They have more centurions per population than almost anywhere else in the world. And they're big, strong people.
And they're huge and strong and jacked.
Right, exactly.
Guys, man, like the mountain. What's that guy's name? Gregor or whatever?
Oh, Gregor? It's Thor Bjornsson. Yeah, he's a big guy. But yeah,
Gregor was his name in Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, that's his actor name. Yeah, sure. But when I got back, Iceland gets it. I mean, they know they lived on a cold rock where you weren't getting fruits and vegetables from whole food. All you're getting is, whatever animals you got with you that you can eat. And you might have got a few little grains imported from Denmark, but that's what they grew up historically. They understood it. And so now in Iceland, it's kind of interesting. Iceland's an interesting country. They've got, only about 300,000 people. They've already got 1,000 people doing a carnivore diet.
Wow.
Which to me that's a huge percentage of that population. And they're having a blast. And so, it's interesting. It's kind of going through like wildfire in that country.
That's crazy. Another thing that people tend to omit when they're talking about when they're the blue zones and stuff like this. Most of these populations, people are working outside. People are in the sun. People are moving their bodies. They're not sedentary. They probably have strong, robust social lives, and they're not spending their life arguing about veganism on social media. There's a lot of other factors. A lot of the times, vitamin D levels are crucial for health. Everybody knows vitamin D from the sun. But it's not just vitamin D. There's a million other things. There's an entire range of frequencies that the sun gives off. You have near infrared and red frequencies that are incredibly beneficial. So a lot of these populations that, people recognize as being robust and healthy and long-lived, they're living outside. They have communal lives where they're, not watching TV all damn day, learning about the, whatever bullshit the news is telling you to be freaked out about, and how the nukes are going to get you, and your neighbor is a terrorist, or whatever is going on now. It's like the new Cold War now, I think, is the new thing. But, it's like they're not into this. These people are living life. They're moving their bodies. So I think that's a really important factor too, which kind of brings me to my next question for you. Is like, you've changed your life dramatically, I know, over the last few years. You were a surgeon. You are a surgeon. Currently, are you in practice right now?
No, I'm not. I'm not in practice right now. I may go back into it later in the year or next year, perhaps, depending on how some things work out. I got into a big sort of battle with my hospital over the fact that I was selecting non-operative treatment and preferencing diet over surgical treatment. So we ended up in about a 2-year-long legal battle. And so that ended up with me leaving the hospital and terminating my ability to practice for a while. And so hopefully, although quite honestly, it's kind of interesting because I've affected more lives positively just from changing people's diet via the internet than I have, in 2 decades of practicing as a practicing surgeon. It's just amazing.
And what a huge sacrifice too. It's like, how many doctors out there? Especially the young doctors who are like incredible amounts of debt have been accrued in order to, assume this position as a doctor. You're talking about decades of school. Was it when you first started doing this? Did you expect to see backlash? Did you expect this at all, or did it come about surprisingly?
Well, I was a bit naive. I was a bit surprised. I guess, the bottom line is it's about the money, and if you're a surgeon and I was a very high volume surgeon making a lot of money for the hospital. And when I sort of said, I want to take a break from that and counsel people on lifestyle, there's a lot of pushback to allow me to do that. You know, I was told, quote unquote, the appetite is not there for you to do that. We would like you to continue, you know, just being a high volume surgeon. And so when I kind of pushed away from that and started doing my own thing, yeah, I got quite a bit of backlash, and, you know, people came after me, and, you know, I still had to, you know, it was pretty injurious to myself and my family. And I'm still sort of kind of getting through that stuff. But, you know, fortunately I've got a pretty good support system, and,
I like how
you
I've
know,
never heard you complain about this. There's no sob story. It's not like Shawn Baker's out there trying to get on the news and say, "Oh, I'm being persecuted." No, I mean, it's like you seem to be in a really good place, and you seem hyped to be helping so many people. Like, it's maybe this, you know, even though it was probably financially burdensome and probably really, really stressful to, you know, be kind of lambasted like that in a, you know, being a respected, very highly intelligent guy in your field. Even though you've dealt with these hardships, it seems like it was kind of a blessing in disguise almost.
well, I mean, certainly I think, I mean, ultimately, if I can impact, you know, many lives versus just a handful, and in a generally hugely positive way. I mean, if you look at the people that we're seeing, you know, even at the little website we just started called meatheals.com, and we've got people that have literally regain their life. I mean, they've come from this despair to back to people. And, you know, the best I could do as a surgeon was, you know, fix some guy's broken bone, or, you know, maybe replace their knee. And that's a limited win. You know, that's just a Band-Aid it's a high price Band-Aid on a, you know, on a symptom. It's not truly changing someone's health. And I think that's, to me, to be able to do that is really one of the reasons I went to become a physician, was to really improve people's lives. And the problem is, our medical system is, like you said, it's backward. It's set up just for disease management, symptom management, putting Band-Aids on, and prescribing pills. And we should be putting all of our, not all, but most of our resources in this preventive aspects. And we could literally revolutionize and turn around this chronic disease disaster that we have looming. Well, it's already here, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. And if we don't do that, it's just gonna, you know, we are going to be this society, this dystopian society where people, you know, are hovering around in their little lift chairs. They can't walk anymore, and they're getting their little soy patties or whatever, their synthetic food. And it's just,
Yeah, right.
it's just,
You see
I don't.
that new Blade Runner film? Like, you ever watch the original Blade Runner?
I saw the original. I haven't seen the new one though. But
I would suggest watching the new one. It's not corny Hollywood. It's like, it's pretty good. But there's this scene where the guy's in his apartment, and like the AI bot that he like falls in love with, that's made by the corporation that owns him. And it's crazy. It's like he's like in love with this AI bot, and he buys her this stuff, and she pretends she loves him, and there's this really wild thing. But she brings him dinner, which is just like, it's this hologram. It's not even a real person, and then it's this mush plate, and then there's a hologram over the plate, and it shows it being like meat or chicken and like real food, but it's just this like soylent, you know, the soylent green crap. So yeah, man, it's really, really cool to see you actually going out there, you know, just affecting people's life positively, and having the guts to put yourself out there and to be the heretic. Really, I mean, like, we're looking at religious sentiment that's driving this. We're looking at, and by religious, I don't mean like as a pejorative, as all religious sentiment is. But I mean, like this is like a chosen dogma that needs to be questioned, and you're the heretic that's out there speaking about it, and you've taken a position of that's not easy to take, telling people what most people don't want to hear, and I think it's really cool. You know,
yeah, I mean, I certainly, I get my share of stones thrown my way, and that's, you know, that's fine, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of got thick skin, but you know, just back to, you know, one thing I think is interesting, you know, because there's so many people these days, particularly, that, you know, they're so malnourished, they have so many medical issues and health issues, and they're depressed, and their anxiety, and they literally look forward to a world where robots will do everything for us, and we don't have to think, and we don't have to act, and we don't even have to be alive. We just have to sit there and and plug into the AI.
right.
I think there's
It's like, who wants that? No one really wants that. If they really experience just being a freaking vegetable, no one wants that shit.
But I think there's people that have resigned themselves to that because they're so unhealthy and they can't get out of that. And I think when you actually, you know, do a diet like I'm doing and take control of your life, your mental health turns around. I've seen so many people say they feel like they're alive again. You know, before they're just kind of existing, and they're kind of waiting. We're all out there waiting for the computers and the robots to do it all for us and save us and make us all healthy. But that is a fantasy that's going to turn out to be a disaster, I think.
No, I mean it's a highly profitable fantasy though. If you're, I mean it's a profitable illusion, and I think it's really important that we question these illusions, that we actually question we question the foundations of the assumptions that got us to where we're at here. So yeah, let's see. You mentioned meatheals.com. I've got Tom Ronayne from meatheals.com talking about his the amazing benefits he's seen in the chats, and a few other people talking about meatheals.com. Where else can people find information from you, or the work that you're doing? Where else can people find you?
Yeah, so obviously my Instagram account, Shawn SHAWN Baker BAKER 1967. I generally kind of rotate, either success stories or little studies I'll put up, which the vegans all go crazy on and hate it because they say it's cherry picked. I'm like, well, it's a study, so you can't, only their studies count apparently. And then
anything's cherry picked if it doesn't agree with my cherry picked.
Exactly. So I just say, hey, look, there's another side to this story. We need to question this stuff. So I'll do that. I'll put some stuff of, obviously steaks, and, there's a lot of people that are participants. So it's a fun little adventure. S Baker MD on Twitter. Then I've got a little, it's a training system, carnivoretrainingsystem.com, that people that have been kind of, it kind of shows how to implement a carnivorous diet, and more importantly, sort of training that I think is safe and effective. As a surgeon and as an athlete, I think I've combined a pretty safe, effective, general health program for strength, hypertrophy, conditioning, and explosivity, which I think are important components of health and aging. So those are my main things. We still got n=many.com going. And so as we've been collecting all this data from people that are doing the carnivore diet and there's also some other protocols that people can use, but we're collecting all that data, and we're gathering it, and we're going to hopefully get this out so we can kind of publish it and show the world what's truly happening when we look at large numbers.
Fantastic. One more question for you, just about I meant to ask this earlier, but we got distracted. We got sidelined. So obviously your life's changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. We talked a little bit about, the other aspects of health other than just diet. I mean, what are some other things that are important to you in life, just for maintaining balance, for maintaining health, and whether that's mind state or physical health?
Well, I mean, obviously I think exercise is important. I think being active is important, no matter what you call exercise. Obviously getting outside, participating in life, having a purpose in life, enjoying what you do, having a passion, I think is going to keep you alive. I mean, there's so many people that, if they don't have that, their life kind of dwindles away pretty quickly. So I think you have to be engaged in life, with people, with a purpose. Rest, recovery, getting good sleep, prioritizing all those things. Obviously, nutrition is important. And then I think that just, having fun, and life's about having fun at some point. You're going to have the bad times, but you need to go out of your way to have fun sometimes.
What do you do for fun? What's one of the things you've been doing lately?
I've got a lot of kids. So for me, playing with my kids is pretty fun. I enjoy.
How many kids you have? How many kids you got?
Yeah, I've got 4. So I've got a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12, soon to be 12-year-old. So
wow, that's cool. We got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Yeah, it keeps you busy, and it's fun. Though.
This is the best, man. It's amazing. Sweet. Yeah. All right, right on, man. So, Shawn, it's been nice getting to know you. If you ever cruise down to Ecuador, make sure to shoot me an email. And if I ever find myself up north and we're in the same area, we'll be sure to link up, and you can teach me how to make a proper steak.
Good for you. Yeah.
My wife makes my steaks. I can't do it.
Let me ask you a quick question. Do you know what cuy is?
Cuy? Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know if they ate that here in Ecuador. Yeah. I had some in Peru. I have to say I don't know if it was prepared not that well, but I didn't quite enjoy it. But that was before I was a carnivore. Maybe I would enjoy it.
They kind of burn it, huh? All right, so cuy, for those of you who don't know, it's guinea pig. So it's like a big rat-looking thing, and they're highly prized here. They eat grass. So my neighbors will come, and they'll ask me if they can come in the yard and cut grass this tall. They call it carrizo. They'll cut the carrizo, and they'll feed it to the cuys. And it's a delicacy here. They kind of, I think they overcook it. Like I think they're not cooking it like you're cooking your steaks. They seem real tough, sharp grilled.
Yeah.
Big guinea pig thing. But that's another one of the staple foods here. And also donkey fat from a young donkey they use that as medicine. I don't know like what they use it for. Arthritis. Jessica's hollering at me. They said arthritis they use it for.
Well, having seen so many people get better with their arthritis, eating meat diets, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some truth to that. It would be interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard that young donkey meat is really, really good. It sounds funny, but different cultures, they're using different foods. They're using the animals that are available in their local area. And yeah, it's amazing like how robust the human diet is and how much variation there is. But really, like when you look at it, there's not a single population in the world that has survived long term without eating some sort of animal products. I mean, a lot of people bring up, well, India's vegetarian. I don't know. Look at India. There's a lot of other issues there too that go along with it. So, yeah, let's see. You got anything else you want to talk on? Anything else you want to hit on?
I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna go eat a steak, man. That's what.
All right. So cool, man. So Shawn, take it easy, my friend. I'm glad you're out there doing what you do. I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your day with your lovely family to hang out on the internets and talk to my audience here. And I know that a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this. So thanks for coming on. Meatheals.com. And what was the carnivore diet website?
You can do carnivoretrainingsystem.com. And then we've got our World Carnivore Tribe Facebook group, and we're hosting March Meatness. So March
Meatness, I love it. March Meatness. What's March Meatness going to be?
It's just people to try out a month of just eating meat, do the carnivore diet for a month, and record your experience, share it with the rest of the World Carnivore Tribe over on Facebook. And we had World Carnivore Month. We got about a couple thousand participants, and so now we're up to over 5,000 people, and I think we'll grow it even more this month.
Well, all right. March Meatness. March is tomorrow, right? No, 2 days from now. It is March. Right. It's March Meatness, guys. Well, I might have to join in on the celebration. I don't know if I'll go. I do like eggs lately, and I get some goat cheese that I really like too. But I've actually been doing a pretty dang carnivorous diet lately.
Yeah, I mean, go eggs and cheese are fine. Just but keep it heavily meat, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, I do find though, just like you said, if I overdo it on cheese or if I overdo it on eggs, like I'll go a few days. I love fried eggs, and but I'll go sometimes where I'll do 18 eggs in a day. Every once in a while though, I'll get a little stomach issues from too many eggs and definitely from too much cheese. It's not always optimal, but it tastes so dang good. So, all right, cool. March Meatness is starting 2 days from now. Maybe we'll do some sort of a follow-up with Dr. Shawn Baker, the carnivore heretic, the apex predator of North America, roaming the internet and spreading awareness about carnivore diets. So, Shawn, thanks a lot, man. You're an awesome dude.
All right, man. I guess I'll jump out now.
I'll stop the broadcast.